Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us in these videos. My name is Anouk, and I will introduce to you the industry experts that will share their knowledge with us.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the pricing webinar. My name is Damiano Zennaro. I'm the Global Director for Advisory Services at Ideas. My background is revenue management. I did work for a long time for Intercontinental Hotels Group, around systems, education, and revenue management. I'm very passionate about revenue management. That's why I'm here today, just to show you a bit about pricing. Well, that's a great question, because a lot of people are asking themselves, so why is pricing at the top of the list of every single revenue manager? I think the best thing just to understand the importance of pricing is just to look at a study that has been made, very recently by McKinsey. The study is dated 2017. So let me take you through a couple of, details on that. So the study of McKinsey in 2017 looked at the different profit levers in business across various fields. So for example, this chart shows how different financial levers affect the revenue. Notice that if you save 1% more on your fixed cost, it will contribute 1.1% more to your bottom line, meaning profits. Likewise, if you increase your volume of sales by 1%, it will increase your profit by 2.1%. If you improve your variable cost, such as operating costs, by 1%, it will lead to a 3.8% improvement in your profits. However, if you could improve your pricing by 1%, it will contribute to your bottom line as much as 6%. So as you can see, the best and most efficient way to improve your profitability is to improve your pricing strategy. While this study was done for business in general and was not specific to hotels, pricing has been established as the biggest profit improvement lever since price increases drop directly to the bottom line. So with this in mind, let's start having a look more in depth about pricing management. So we know usually three pricing decision levels. The first one is the industry level. So at the industry price level, you would consider how supply, demand, cost, regulations, and other high-level factors interact and affect overall prices. This is the point at which the business owner decides to build a hotel or not, and whether he builds a 3-star or a 5-star facility. He will look at the industry price level, review the feasibility studies, analyze the supply demand and business trade forecast, and determine his potential return on investments. So this is the industry level. The second level is the product market strategy level. This is the level at which you would price a product or service relative to the competition. Here is where we deal with market-driven pricing or pricing positioning. For example, how do you want your price position to be seen among your competitors? For example, if you are the market leader, you can probably afford to price your product a little higher than everybody else. If your position is in the middle, however, your price will be higher than the competitors below you, but less than the market leader. The third one is around the transaction price level. The focus is to decide the exact price for each transaction. This refers to the day-to-day prices, as in how much you want to sell your product unit for today, next week, and the 2 weeks from now. When we look at these three levels of pricing strategy, we go from limited control to more control as we operate the hotel on a day-to-day basis. So the key to successful pricing hangs on the buyer's perception of value. Value perceptions or utility is the customer's assessment of all that they have received in comparison to what they have given. So they ask themselves, by giving up this much money, what am I getting by way of not just physical features, but also overall benefits? Does it feel right? Basically, it doesn't really matter what you charge. It is the customer's perception of your price that matters. If the customer thinks the price is too high in relation to the value delivered for the product or service, then they won't buy. If they think the price is too low, then again, they will not buy because they might be suspicious of the quality in relation to the price. So the price may not feel right. A customer perceptions of what is a reasonable price is more important than what you want to charge for your product or service. And the customer decides what's reasonable based on perceived value for money, not price. It's creating this perception of value that tells the customer the price is right. I'm a firm believer that in the long term, it's always better to add perceived values to your product rather than reduce your prices. And don't forget, customers are smarter these days, have more disposable income, and have more choice than ever before. So the key to making the sale is to communicate value. Do it strongly, that the price seems reasonable in relation to the product or service that you are offering. So what we use to assess our value, we usually have a graph where we can actually put and value your hotel or our hotel versus the value, versus the rate and the value that actually they show. So value perception depends on many factors, being your competitors the first one. So the value assessment is beneficial to understand your positioning versus the competition. So essentially, the value assessment is a list of features and how they are perceived by the customer. So for example, in this chart, your customer's value assessment of your product is compared to that of your potential competitors. So in this case, your property is rated at 0, and any competitor that has been rated higher than you is in the quadrants to the right. Those ranked lower, in the customer perception, of course, are in the quadrant to the left. So in regards to pricing, your hotel's rates are used as the benchmark. So those competitors charging more than you are in the upper 2 quadrants, while those charging less are in the 2 lower quadrants. In this example, your potential competitors are spread all over the charts. So where the competitors appear on the chart will indicate to you whether or not they are a true competitor. For example, hotels in the top left quadrants are more expensive and offer fewer features. These hotels will probably not be a big threat to you at all. By this logic, the 2 hotels in the bottom right quadrant are your true competitors because they charge less than you and are perceived by the customers to offer greater value. So keep in mind that this chart might change as your competitors change their prices or product offerings, altering their value ratings. So your actions in regards to value ratings and prices also impact the way your competitors are positioned on the chart. For example, if you wish to maintain your position on this chart, the critical thing is to maintain your value ratings compared to the competition. So the higher your value ratings, the more difficult it is for your competitor to catch up with you. Since your customer's value assessment can be difficult to change once established, however, the easiest way to change the way your competitors appear in relation to you is to change your price. So we saw the pricing at transaction level. This is key for our pricing structure and how to manage pricing. So hotels are using pricing structure just to make sure that their pricing is at transaction level. So let me show you just a very quick and simple structure of pricing. So pricing structure is different by market segmentations. So therefore, your pricing structure will often mirror or follow the structure of the segmentation that you have created for your hotel. Now, for example, we need to define prices for our transient and group business. Within transient, we need to determine whether our prices will be fixed, dynamic, qualified, or unqualified. So this is really a great question. Pricing is at the top of every single discussion today in every single brand. Is it an independent hotel, or is it a small group, or is it a big group? We saw from the beginning that pricing is really hitting your profits, and this is why it's so important just to make sure that we have a pricing structure and we have a pricing strategy in place. Now, a lot happened in the last year, truly. So I try just to make sure that we just hit the big points, the most important points around the evolution of pricing in the last years. So let's have a look, for example, how we developed in the last years. So pricing at a transaction level, as we've seen, is managed in most hotels using a pricing structure. So we've seen the pricing structure, we've seen a different, level of pricing. So let me take you what happened in the last years in the evolution of pricing. So we really moved from a fixed rate structure, fixed meaning that basically the rates were static, were really fixed. You couldn't really change it, during the year, into a more dynamic environment. We will see later what dynamic really means. we really moved from a concept of rack rate into a concept of best available rate. So the rack rate usually was the highest rate possible that you can actually charge. It was a fixed rate. We move into a best available rate, which can actually fluctuate, every day if you wish. We moved from many rates available, and they were usually unfenced. We will see what actually means unfenced later on, into a percentage of discounts rates, which is fence rate, which we call, fence rates. This is a completely different approach to pricing. And then we really moved from product-based into market-based. Usually we were looking into the product. We've seen from the beginning of pricing, of this pricing webinar, that the value is what really counts. So we tried as well just to measure our pricing market and value-based. So I just mentioned to you dynamic pricing. What really does actually mean dynamic pricing? With dynamic pricing, you offer different prices to different customers, driven by pricing transparency. So dynamic pricing allows you to maximize your profits because you can easily, quickly, and automatically adjust your prices to meet changes in cost, supply, demand, and the marketplace. It also allows you to treat customers in a given period equally. So dynamic pricing allows you to have multiple pricing points to offer guests based on factors surrounding the reservations, such as the date the reservation was made. While it can be profitable, dynamic pricing has some drawbacks. For example, since two clients booking the same package may be paying different rates based on the time of their booking, the customer may become confused as to what is a fair price. On the other side, corporate clients who need to know the cost ahead of time to balance their budget may not know exactly how much they will be charged. So dynamic pricing creates more internal complexities in the managing the dynamic environment at all points of the organization, such as sales, front office, and reservations. And also, to be effective, dynamic pricing require structured processes and standards, consistency, and a thorough understanding of the whys and the whos. So how do we implement dynamic pricing? So we use what is called the best available rates, or BAR, also known as the best rate guarantee. So this might actually be called differently, but the best available rate is the recommended rate for customers who do not have a pre-contracted rate and are not qualified for any discounts due for their segments. Best available rates is defined as the optimal rate to quote based on the probability of booking the guest. While effective, best available rate requires the correct balance between demand and price. To do this, market segmenting and value perceptions, as well as your forecast of demands, which we're going to talk about in the next segment, all come into place as you determine your best available rates. To do this, market segmenting and value perceptions come into play as you determine your best available rates. But having one best available rate may not be the right approach to capture all the value your market is willing to spend on you. For example, what if your occupancy for the date is low? You will not want to offer the same rates that you would on a date when occupancy is high. For these reasons, we also use derivative best available rates. These rates are above or below the best available rates and are derived from or in some way linked to the best available rates for that particular day. So any change to the best available rate affects these rates too. Typical derivative rates include value-added package rates, advanced purchase rate, and non-refundable rates, and, for example, negotiated rates. Well, as I said, there is a reference rate that we just call, the best available rate in this case. And there are many rates attached to this, main rate, meaning that in dynamic pricing, all rates fluctuate, following one specific rate in this case. There might be some other pricing approaches to that, but I would say that right now, this is what is, used for a dynamic pricing structure. But I can give you an example. Here we are. So this dynamic pricing structure is based on the best available rates. So the value-added derivative is priced at $20 above the bar, the best available rates, while the discount derivatives are priced at a discount of 10% less and at 20% less than the best available rates. The example also shows how occupancy can control which best available rate is offered. Based on this dynamic pricing structure, when the occupancy is less than 50%, the rate will be $100. If occupancy is between 50 and 70%, the best available rate will be $120. In both instances, the related rates will reflect this change as well. So what is a price point then in dynamic pricing? And why we have dynamic pricing, and why do we have different price points? Well, this illustration explains why it is necessary to have multiple pricing points or different best available rates. If you have only a single best available rate in the center, you are missing out on revenue in two other significant areas above and below your rate points. If you have multiple pricing points, in the illustrated case there are such points, you will notice that you have far more demand capture than with the single best available rates. So that's a great point for pricing structure and pricing management. So you might choose actually to apply conditions to those rates. For example, you might allow reservation using the highest rate to be cancelled or changed at any time, but offer no refunds on the lower rate. You might also make the lowest rate valid only on certain days or available only with online bookings, for example. So basically, this allows the customer to get the lower price as long as he is willing to accept a few restrictions as a part of the deal. So this is one of the principles of pricing. So you need to do something to get a discount, to get something back. So what are some examples of such conditioning or fence rates? So if you want to create a package or discount rate for a slow period of time, say you notice your Saturdays show low bookings, then you can create a package targeting Fridays and Saturdays and fence that package with advanced booking time, minimal night stay, or non-refundable, for example, cancellation charges or prepaid deposits. It's important to establish a pricing structure that prevents that lower rates from being used in place of higher rates. Perhaps when you go back to your hotel, you might want to review your pricing structure to make sure that your rates don't eat into each other and that you have adequate fences in place to protect them. So one question you may all be asking yourself at the moment, dynamic rates are great, but I still have fixed rates with my key accounts. Yeah, this is correct. Although there has been an evolution from fixed to dynamic rates for retail business, this has not been the case to the same extent for contracted business. Many of the big global accounts around the world are still asking for fixed rate for their travelers. So we need to make sure we understand how this works and how we can work with this to ensure optimal revenue for our hotels under this model. By definition, fixed rates are rates that are locked and can only be changed under certain conditions. These rates are often contracted rates, meaning that the client has negotiated the rates, maybe for a particular time frame or to apply to a certain group of guests. So sometimes what seems at first to be an obvious logic to enter into fixed rate contract is not so sensible once you look at it beneath the surface. For instance, if you use volumes as your criteria, you might give a higher volume client, say client A, a better rate for the coming year than client B, who use fewer rooms in the same periods. But what if client A's higher volume happened on your peak days or seasons and the rest of the year the production from client A was in fact fairly small, while client B's production was low but consistent all year? Would you still believe that client A should get better rates? If client A only comes on your peak days, it may be because they already have a competitor hotel lined up who they go to before they come to you. In other words, they come to you when they cannot get rooms elsewhere. If they only come to you on your peak days when your products could be sold at a higher rate to the other customers, the true value of client A to your business needs to be reevaluated. So this example shows that fixed rates should be carefully evaluated to ensure you're getting the most profit from your rates. So here are some criteria to evaluate an account successfully. Some of them are traditional, some others are slightly more modern in a dynamic nature. So we try to move really in key account pricing from production to promised contract levels, from rational pricing, from year-over-year volume rate growth, from allotments into a different environment. And this different environment will be based on production during low occupancy periods, revenue displacements during high occupancy, last room available versus no last room available, length of stay, for example, incidental spends. This is what really we should actually evaluate when we look at pricing our accounts. So most hotels we've seen before will have a pricing structure that actually can handle both a fixed and dynamic pricing. So tie your pricing back into your segmentation. Do they match? So most hotels will have to have a pricing structure that can be handled both at fixed and dynamic pricing. So tie your pricing back into your segmentation. Do they match, and is everything accounted for? One does not exclude the other. A mix of the different pricing model is the best option for most hotels and situations. So you need to ask yourself, what is your current pricing structure? What are the pros and cons of this structure? What could actually work better for you? So we've seen out what is the pricing structure is. We see what dynamic versus fixed rates is. We saw that there are many price points around our pricing structure. We saw that the pricing should actually be different by market segmentation. So if we put all these elements together, the question will be, how can we actually manage that, manually? So how can we just do and make sure that every single market segmentation, every single day, every single room type is priced appropriately? Now, that's really become very difficult. So that's why revenue management systems enter the space, heavily in the last years, just to make sure that there is an analysis behind that actually tells us or indicates the best way to price by room type, by days of the week, by market segmentation, by length of stay. So let's have just a very simple example on how it really works in an automated environment. So in these examples, we have several days with different room types per price point. So we have the best available rate that we've seen before. We have a discounted rate. We have an advanced purchase rate, for example. We have a rate that actually a promotional rate, in this case for $160, for example. We have a two rate, $150. So they're all ranked into our example here. So what actually does a revenue management system, in essence, is just to decide, based on all the analytics that he did, what is the best rate to be sold on a certain day. Now, for example, in this very first example, on Saturday, the minimum rate that actually we want to accept is $190. So if the minimum rate is defined at $190, some of the rates will not be sellable. Now, in this example, the promotional rate 160 is not fitting into the rate strategy. Now, he will accept the 135 simply because it's an allotment. It's basically a two rate. It's a fixed rate that actually has been contracted at the beginning. So it will be accepted because of a different status than other dynamic rates. Look, so let's have a look at this first example. So we have different days here, just to make it easy as a week. We have different price points, as you can see on the left. So you have best available rate, you have an advanced purchase product, for example, you have discounted rate, you have a promotional rate, and a two rates. Usually two rates are fixed and are just depends on allotments. But let's, for the sake of the example, take it very easy. So if the minimum rate to be considered on Friday is $300, you can understand that none of the rates probably will be taken for one night. So one night stay will not be accepted in this case because they are all below the threshold, if you wish, or the price point of $300. What happens if we just take different days? Now, the minimum rate to be accepted might be actually different from Friday to Saturday. It might actually be different by day. So that's why it's very difficult in a manual environment just to manage all of this. So in this example, for example, you have Friday and Saturday, you have a minimum rate to be accepted at $300, and on Saturday, minimum rate to be accepted at $190. So what happens if we have a length of stay of 2 nights? So we are requesting basically pricing for 2 nights. So as you can see, we just need to add the two rates requested for the day at every single price points and compare it to what is the minimum accepted. So in this case, what will be accepted is the bar, is the best available rate. What will not be accepted is all the other product except the two product which might be allocated and which might be fixed. So it will depend on an allocation that you cannot really change. This also put us questions around our dynamic pricing and our price that we want to apply for different rates and different market segmentation. So what we've seen today is the surface is only, the overall concept about pricing. Pricing is a big topic. Every single hotel, regardless where it's located or regardless its size, is a big hotel or a small hotel, we always face pricing structure challenges. We also know why pricing is so important. If I well remember on the first slides, we saw that a 1% increase in price might actually impact 6% of your profits. So this is why pricing is so fundamental. It impacts your profits. What we've seen as well, the rest of the webinar, is all around the structure of pricing. So a pricing structure that every single hotel should actually have. The pricing structure depends as well on your market segmentation. So you need to have as well a market segmentation in that. We've seen as well the difference in the evolution of pricing. If we start in the old days with the fixed pricing, we're all moving into a dynamic environment. So we've seen the dynamic pricing really works. So having one price point is not feasible anymore. We need to have more price points, and we need to manage the price point differently. It's not only about the price points that we discussed, it's also about room types. So for example, I can apply a different price point by room type. And don't forget, that's what we've seen at the end, your pricing might actually be different by if it's considered for one day or if it is considered for a length of stay. So what happens with my price points if I want to book my hotel or your hotel for 2 nights, or for 4 nights, or 7 nighs? What does actually happen in terms of room types when you just try to sell for different days? So we're seeing a very simple example of, a minimum acceptable rates, divided by different price points and divided into a length of stay. So this is only related to rooms revenue. So it is pretty complicated and complex to manage that. So we have system doing that. But if we expand the concept into different areas or different revenue streams, like food and beverage, for example, or like meeting and events, really the things is getting more complicated, especially if we just go down into profits. So we are not there yet. So I think that technologically, we're still a lot to do in trying to combine, all these revenue streams into one revenue management. That will be total revenue management. Now, once we are working on metrics for F&B and meeting and events, for example, we are very far from combine all these revenue streams and finding the best solution. Well, that's the next challenge for all revenue managers. Don't forget that revenue manager also needs to evolve. So we have pricing evolving, we have the industry evolving, revenue management needs also to evolve. So the skills that are required to face some challenges like total revenue management will be probably much more different than it was before. So to the next challenge then in total revenue management and profitable revenue management.